I sat at the kitchen table staring blankly at the newspaper in front of me. The words blurred together, unread, as the same thought played in my mind for the 1,000th time. How did it get this bad? Jenna had always had a sharp tongue, but it wasn't always like this. Early on, there had been love, warmth, even if we struggled with bills and raising our 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie. But over the years, something shifted. What used to be small, sarcastic remarks turned into full-blown verbal beatings. "You're worthless," Jenna had screamed at me just last week, slamming the door on her way out. "If I didn't have to rely on you, I'd be long gone." And the worst part? I had believed her. For years, I convinced myself that she was right, that maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe my 2 jobs and my effort to keep our family afloat wasn't worth anything to her anymore. A loud laugh broke my thoughts, pulling me back to reality. Emma and Sophie were in the living room, playing with their toys, their small giggles and chatter filling the otherwise tense house. They were the reason I stayed. Despite the bruises Jenna left on my soul with her words, I stayed for them. Leaving would mean leaving them behind in Jenna's toxic wake, and that terrified me. Still, something had been gnawing at me lately. Something beyond the usual pain of Jenna's emotional abuse. It had started when I found a brand new bottle of perfume in our bedroom a few weeks ago, one I hadn't bought for her. And then there was the new blouse I'd never seen her wear before, more expensive than anything we could afford. I had tried to ignore it, but the final straw came today, just an hour ago. It was a men's watch, sitting on the kitchen counter when I came home from work early. I stared at it now, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't own a watch like that, and I knew for a fact that no one in our house did either. I stood up, slowly, like the weight of this discovery had finally tipped the balance. Jenna had been growing more secretive recently, and the pieces were beginning to fit together in a way I didn't want to believe. I pocketed the watch, unable to look at it any longer, and walked into the living room. The girls didn't notice me, too busy with their toys. I glanced upstairs where Jenna was supposed to be, supposedly resting after a long day. My gut told me something was wrong. The air in the house felt thick with tension, a feeling I had grown all too used to. I walked to the bottom of the stairs, feeling like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't take back. "Jenna?" I called out, my voice sounding too soft, too uncertain. No answer. I could hear a faint sound coming from upstairs, a floorboard creaking, soft murmurs. But that didn't make sense. I knew Jenna was home, but who else could possibly be here? The watch in my pocket felt heavy, like it was burning a hole in my jeans. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, heart pounding as the muffled voices from above filtered down to me. They were low, barely audible, but unmistakably there. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "Jenna?" I called again, louder this time. Still, no answer. I started up the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The sounds were clearer now, whispers, the faint rustling of sheets. My throat tightened, and I had to force myself to keep moving, even though part of me already knew what I was about to find. The thought hit me hard. Who was in my home? As I reached the top of the stairs, I moved quietly down the hallway, toward our bedroom. My hand brushed against the pocket where I had stashed the watch, the weight of it pulling at my every thought. I had tried to dismiss the signs, Jenna's sudden new clothes, the luxury perfume, the way she had been dressing up lately, the hostile outbursts. I'd told myself it was nothing, that maybe I was overthinking, that the stress was getting to both of us. But now, standing outside our bedroom door, I knew better. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see the edge of the bed, the rumpled sheets, and 2 silhouettes. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, but my body felt like it was betraying me. My hands trembled, my legs felt weak. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to see what was happening on the other side of the door. But I had to know. I had to confirm what my gut had been screaming at me for weeks. With one final breath, I pushed the door open. The sight hit me like a physical blow. Jenna, lying in our bed, the same bed we had shared for years, with someone else. Not just someone else, a much younger man. My heart sank as I realized it was him. The new neighbor. The one who had moved in a few months ago and had been coming over under the pretense of helping with odd jobs around the house. They both froze when the door creaked open fully. Jenna's eyes went wide, her hand still resting on the young man's chest. The neighbor, shirtless, scrambled to cover himself with the bedsheet, his face pale with panic. "Ethan!" Jenna's voice was breathless, but it wasn't shock, it was defiance. She didn't jump up in shame or apologize. She just lay there staring at me with a blank expression like this wasn't the first time, like she didn't care that I had caught her in the act. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All I could do was stand there, trying to comprehend how the woman I had spent years loving and sacrificing for had done this. To me. To our family. "Get out," I finally whispered, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. The neighbor stammered something incoherent, but I wasn't listening. I was too focused on Jenna, on the cold, indifferent look in her eyes as she sat up slowly, not even bothering to cover herself properly. "Ethan," she said again, her voice calmer now, like she was in control. "We need to talk." "Talk?" My voice cracked. "You want to talk now?" I stood there, gripping the doorframe so hard I thought I might break it. My entire world had crumbled in an instant. My wife, Jenna, the mother of my children, was in our bed with the young neighbor, and the way she looked at me, as if this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, made it all worse. "Talk?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "You've been cheating on me, and now you want to talk?" Jenna finally stood up, grabbing a robe from the chair beside the bed. She didn't rush. There was no panic, no regret. The neighbor, now dressed, edged toward the door, head hung low, clearly terrified. "Just go," I said through clenched teeth, not even looking at him. He bolted without a word, disappearing down the stairs. My mind was spinning, trying to process what I had just witnessed, but nothing made sense. The world felt distant, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Jenna turned toward me, finally meeting my eyes. "This isn't the time for you to act all high and mighty, Ethan." Her words were a knife to the gut. "Excuse me?" She crossed her arms, standing in the middle of the room like she owned the place. "You heard me. Don't act surprised. This marriage has been over for years. You were just too blind to see it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was too blind? I've been working myself to death to keep this family together, and this is what you do? You destroy it all? Jenna rolled her eyes. "Destroy? You destroyed this marriage with your weakness. You're never around. You're always working, always too tired to be a husband. What did you think was going to happen?" My hands trembled as I tried to keep my anger in check. "I've been working 2 jobs to provide for you and the kids. I've been trying to hold everything together while I what?" she snapped. "While I lived my life? Don't pretend like you're some saint, Ethan. You've been a ghost in this house. And I'm not going to apologize for finding someone who actually makes me feel something." I stared at her, the woman I once loved, wondering how we got here. How had I missed this? The years of emotional abuse, the constant belittling, it all made sense now. This wasn't something new. Jenna had been checked out of our marriage for a long time, and I had been too focused on surviving to see it. "Was it him?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The young guy who just ran out of here. Was it just him?" Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "Does it really matter?" It took everything in me not to scream. "Yes, it does matter." Jenna sighed, her tone dripping with boredom. "Fine. No, it wasn't just him, but he's the only one that matters now." I staggered back, the weight of her words nearly knocking me off my feet. "How long has this been going on?" She shrugged. "Months, maybe longer." I lost track. My hands were shaking now, and I had to fight back the tears that threatened to come. "The kids are downstairs, Jenna. Our kids. How could you do this with them in the house?" Her expression softened for the briefest of moments, but it quickly hardened again. "They don't know anything. They don't need to. I'm still their mother, Ethan. Nothing has changed for them. Nothing has changed for them." That was it, the final blow. "I want you out of this house," I said, my voice cold. "Now." She stared at me, unblinking. "You can't make me leave. This is my home, too." "Then I'll leave," I spat, turning toward the door. "But I'm taking the girls," Jenna scoffed. "Good luck with that." I stormed downstairs, my mind racing. The house, the one we had built together, felt foreign to me now. The sound of Emma and Sophie playing in the living room grounded me for a moment, but the rage inside me boiled over again as I thought about what they had just been exposed to. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. I could hear Jenna moving upstairs, likely unfazed by the destruction she had caused. My daughter's soft laughter floated from the living room, a cruel contrast to the chaos tearing through my mind. How had I let it get this bad? Years of insults, emotional manipulation, and now this. The thought of Jenna bringing that man into our home, into our bed, while our daughters were just downstairs filled me with a rage I could barely contain. But it wasn't just rage. It was betrayal. Years of sacrifice, working myself to exhaustion to keep our family together, and all the while she was laughing behind my back. My marriage, my family, everything I thought I knew. It was all built on a lie. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room. Emma and Sophie sat on the floor, their toys spread out around them, oblivious to the storm upstairs. Their faces lit up when they saw me, and for a moment I could almost forget what had just happened. "Daddy!" Sophie ran to me, throwing her arms around my legs. I knelt down, pulling her into a hug, trying to keep the tears from spilling out. Emma joined, wrapping her small arms around me, and I held them both close. "Hey, sweethearts," I said, my voice tight. "How about we go out for ice cream, huh? Just us?" Their eyes lit up with excitement. "Can we, Daddy?" "Please?" Emma asked, her voice filled with joy. I forced a smile. "Of course. Go grab your coats." As they ran to the hallway, I glanced toward the stairs. I could hear Jenna moving around, probably still smug, still thinking she held all the cards. But she didn't. Not anymore. I had to get out of here, and I had to get my daughters away from her. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. Jenna had become a danger, not only to me, but to them. The emotional abuse, the manipulation. I couldn't let my daughters grow up thinking that this was what love was supposed to be. Just as I was about to leave, Jenna appeared at the top of the stairs, her robe now tied loosely around her waist. "What are you doing?" she asked coldly, her eyes narrowing at the sight of me gathering the girls' things. I didn't even look at her. "We're going out," I said flatly, grabbing the girls' jackets from the rack. "Don't wait up," she snorted. "You're really going to take them out after this?" I turned to face her, my patience gone. "Yes, I am. And when I come back, I expect you to be gone." Jenna's eyes darkened, and she descended the stairs slowly, her presence as threatening as it had always been. "You don't get to tell me what to do, Ethan. I'm their mother. I'm not going anywhere." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. "After what you've done, you don't deserve to stay." She stepped closer, her tone dripping with contempt. "You're pathetic. Do you really think you're going to walk out of here and take my kids with you? You couldn't handle them on your own. You can barely handle yourself." My blood boiled, but I had to hold it together for the girls' sake. "We'll see what the courts have to say about that." Jenna laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "The courts? You think they're going to side with you? The courts always side with the mother, Ethan. You're nothing. You've always been nothing." The venom in her words stunned me, but I refused to back down. "I'll fight for them, Jenna. I'm not going to let you drag them down with you." Her smile faded, replaced by a glare that cut through me like a blade. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said, turning toward the door. "But I'm done living in yours." I took the girls by the hand and led them outside, leaving Jenna standing there, seething. I knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't going to let this go easily, but I didn't care. I had to protect my daughters from her, no matter what it cost me. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Emma and Sophie were giggling in the back seat, unaware of the battle that was about to begin. As I drove, My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than I intended, trying to process everything. The kids were laughing in the back seat, completely unaware of the battle I was about to face. They had no idea that their mother was capable of destroying everything, that I was planning to take them away from her for good. The weight of that decision pressed down on me, but I knew I had no choice. Jenna had crossed every line. We pulled into the ice cream shop parking lot, and I forced a smile as I turned to my girls. "What flavor are we getting today?" I asked, trying to sound upbeat. "Chocolate," Sophie squealed. "Vanilla with sprinkles," Emma chimed in, her face beaming. Their innocence was a reminder of what I had to fight for. I couldn't let them stay in that toxic environment any longer. As we ate our ice cream, my mind raced, thinking of how Jenna would retaliate. She wouldn't just let me walk away with them. She'd fight. She'd tear me apart in court if she had to. But I couldn't back down now. After we finished, we drove back home, the evening darkening around us. I dreaded what was waiting for me inside, but I had to face it. Jenna was still their mother, and this confrontation was inevitable. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw the lights on inside. Jenna hadn't left. I parked the car and took a deep breath, turning to the girls. "Okay, sweethearts, go inside and play for a little bit. I need to talk to Mommy." They nodded and ran ahead, unaware of the storm that was about to erupt. I stepped into the house, preparing myself for the worst. Jenna was in the kitchen, her back to me, standing by the sink. She didn't turn around when I walked in. "You came back," she said, her voice cold but calm. "I'm only back for the girls," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "You think you can take them from me, Ethan? You really think you have a chance?" "I'm going to do what's best for them," I said, trying to keep my composure. "And what's best for them is to get away from you." Her eyes darkened, and she took a step forward, her voice rising. "Get away from me? You think I'm the problem here? After everything I've had to deal with because of you?" I clenched my fists, trying to hold back my anger. "Jenna, this isn't about us anymore. It's about them. You're toxic, and I can't let you drag them down." Her face twisted with rage. "You're not taking my kids away from me, Ethan. I'll destroy you in court. They'll see that you're nothing but a deadbeat who works too much and can't even be there for his own family. You're weak." I flinched at her words, the years of abuse ringing in my ears again. But this time, I didn't let her get to me. I stood my ground. "I'm done listening to you tear me down. You can say whatever you want, but I'm fighting for them. They deserve better." Jenna's face contorted in fury, and before I could react, she lunged at me. Her hands were outstretched, grabbing for my shirt as she shoved me back against the wall. "You think you're better than me?" she screamed, her voice filled with venom. "You think you're some kind of hero? You've never been there for us. You've always been too busy with your pathetic jobs." I grabbed her wrists, trying to push her off, but she was relentless. She clawed at my face, her nails scratching across my cheek as she tried to hurt me, to make me feel as worthless as she always said I was. "Jenna, stop!" I shouted, but she didn't listen. Her rage had consumed her completely. I managed to shove her away, breathing heavily as I stared at her. My cheek stung from the scratches, but the real pain was in my heart. This was the woman I had once loved, the mother of my children. And now she was trying to tear me apart both physically and emotionally. She stood there, panting, her eyes wild with fury. "You're not taking them from me, Ethan. I'll make sure of that. You're nothing." I wiped the blood from my cheek and took a step back, feeling the weight of her words, but I didn't falter. "We'll see what the courts have to say," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Her glare burned into me as I walked away, heading upstairs to check on the girls. My heart was racing, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to fight for them, no matter what it took. I closed the door to the girls' room, my hands still shaking from the confrontation downstairs. Emma and Sophie were tucked into bed, their eyes heavy with sleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing between their mother and me. I kissed them on the forehead, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep, but I knew I had to try. As I stood there, watching them drift off to sleep, I felt a surge of guilt. I had failed them by staying in this broken marriage for so long, by allowing Jenna's abuse to seep into every part of our lives. I thought I had been protecting them by staying, by providing, by keeping the family together. But in reality, I had only exposed them to her cruelty. The sounds of the earlier argument still echoed in my mind. Jenna's furious words, her nails clawing at my face, her twisted version of our lives where I was always the problem. It took everything in me not to scream, not to break down right then and there. But I couldn't afford to break. Not now. I crept downstairs, careful not to make a sound. The house was eerily quiet, but I knew Jenna was still there. I could feel her presence, simmering in the darkness. She was waiting for another fight, waiting for me to slip, to give her more ammunition for whatever twisted game she was playing. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I headed straight for the front door, grabbing my jacket off the hook and stepping outside into the cold night air. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get out. I needed to clear my head, to think about my next move. The custody battle was looming over me like a storm cloud, and Jenna had already shown me how far she was willing to go to win. She would lie, manipulate, and use every dirty tactic to turn the girls against me, to keep them under her control. As I walked down the street, I found myself drifting toward Mark's place. He was the only friend I could count on, the only one who knew about the years of abuse. He had been telling me for years to leave, but I had always hesitated, always convinced myself that I could fix it. Now I knew there was nothing left to fix. Mark answered the door in his usual laid-back way, not even surprised to see me standing there. "Rough night?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I gave a bitter laugh, wiping my hand over the cut on my cheek. "You could say that." We sat in silence for a while. Mark handed me a beer, and we stared at the TV without really watching. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for me to unload, but he didn't push. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spoke. "I'm going to fight for them, for the girls." Mark nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "You have to. They don't deserve to grow up in that mess." "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But she's not going to make it easy. She's already turning them against me. She's going to lie in court, say whatever she has to. She knows how to play the victim." "You're doing the right thing, Ethan," Mark said, leaning forward. "You can't let her win. If you don't fight now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." "I'm scared I'm already too late," I admitted, the words finally spilling out. "They love her. She's their mother. They don't see the things I see." "That's what abusers do," Mark said quietly. "They control the narrative. But you're their father, Ethan. That counts for something." I nodded, but doubt still gnawed at me. Jenna had always been good at manipulating people, at twisting the truth to make herself look like the victim. She had been doing it for years, making me feel like the problem, like I wasn't enough. "She attacked me tonight," I said after a moment, rubbing the scratch on my cheek. Mark's eyes widened. "She what?" "Came at me with her nails. Said I was trying to take the girls away from her." Mark sat up straighter. "That's serious, Ethan. If she's getting violent, you need to document it. Don't let this slide." I nodded, knowing he was right. But something about that felt wrong, like I was stooping to her level, using every tactic I could to win. But this wasn't about me. It was about the girls. "I'm going to talk to the neighbor," I said suddenly, the thought hitting me out of nowhere. Mark raised an eyebrow. "The one she's been sleeping with?" "Yeah, he's young, stupid. Maybe he didn't know how deep Jenna's abuse runs. If he's willing to admit what happened, it could help me in court." Mark leaned back in his chair. "That's risky, but maybe it'll pay off." "I have to try," I said, more to myself than to him. "I don't have a choice anymore." The next day, I found myself standing in front of the neighbor's house, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. I wasn't sure what I expected from this confrontation. Part of me wanted to knock him out, to scream at him for being part of Jenna's betrayal. But another part of me knew it wasn't that simple. He was young, barely out of college by the look of him, and I doubted he had any idea what kind of person Jenna really was. I knocked on the door, my stomach twisting. After a few moments, the door creaked open, and there he stood, eyes wide, clearly startled to see me. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his hair a mess, and I wondered if he had been waiting for this moment. "Ethan, he started, but his voice cracked, and he couldn't meet my eyes. "Can I come in?" I asked, my voice flat. I didn't have the energy for hostility anymore. I just needed answers. He stepped aside, letting me in. The place was small, cluttered with boxes. He was still in the process of settling into his new life. I wondered if Jenna had welcomed him with open arms, pretending to be the perfect neighbor, the perfect wife. But she had been lying to both of us. We sat down in the living room, the awkward silence hanging between us. "I'm not here to fight," I finally said. "I just want to know what happened." He swallowed hard, running a hand through his messy hair. I'm so sorry, man. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know how bad things were between you two. She told me you didn't care about her anymore, that you were barely around." I flinched at his words. Jenna had painted me as the villain again, the distant husband who had abandoned her. It was a story I knew she could sell easily. "She lied to you," I said quietly. "I've been working 2 jobs to keep this family going, to make sure our kids have what they need. Jenna, she's been abusive for years. Not just to me, but emotionally. She twisted everything." The neighbor's face paled, and he nodded slowly. I had no idea. I swear, I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started out as small talk. Then she kept inviting me over, and I didn't think about the consequences. I leaned back in my chair, letting his words sink in. He was just another person who had been caught in Jenna's web of manipulation. I wanted to be angry at him, but I couldn't muster the rage anymore. He had been used, just like me. "I'm fighting for custody of my daughters," I said, my voice steady. "Jenna's dangerous. She's toxic, and they need to get away from her." He looked up at me, guilt all over his face. "I didn't know she had kids." That stung. "Yeah, 2 girls. They were downstairs while you were upstairs with her." He winced, his regret palpable. "I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. If there's anything I can do to make it right, I'll do it. I can testify in court, tell them what happened. I never wanted to hurt anyone." I studied him for a moment, realizing that this might be my one chance to tip the scales in my favor. He could be an ally in this fight, whether he knew it or not. "If you testify, it'll help," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "It'll show the courts who Jenna really is. But I need you to be honest. Don't sugarcoat anything." He nodded, his face filled with remorse. "I'll do whatever it takes." I stood up, feeling the weight of this entire mess pressing down on me. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for being willing to own up to it." As I turned to leave, he called after me. "Ethan, I really am sorry." I paused at the door, glancing back at him. "I know, just make sure you show it when it counts." Later that evening, I returned home with the girls after spending the afternoon at the park. The air had been crisp, the girls laughing and chasing each other. For a few hours, I had almost forgotten the battle I was facing. But as soon as we pulled into the driveway, the tension returned. I sent the girls inside while I lingered in the car for a moment, gathering my thoughts. When I finally walked into the house, I was met with an eerie silence. Jenna was nowhere to be seen, and for a second, I felt a sliver of hope that she had left. But then I heard a noise from the kitchen. I stepped inside and froze. Jenna stood there, her back to me, holding something in her hand. My stomach twisted as I realized what it was. A knife. "Jenna," I said cautiously, my voice low. She didn't turn around. "You think you're going to take them from me?" she whispered, her voice filled with venom. "You think you can just walk away and take my children with you?" My heart raced as I edged closer. "Jenna, put the knife down. We can talk about this." She whirled around, her eyes wild with rage, the knife gleaming in her hand. "Talk? You want to talk now? After everything? You're trying to ruin me, Ethan. I'm not going to let you take them from me. I'll make you regret ever thinking you could win." I took a step back, hands raised. "Jenna, think about the girls. They're upstairs. Don't do this." But she was beyond reason. She lunged at me, the knife slicing through the air. I dodged, barely, and stumbled back against the counter. The look in her eyes was nothing short of madness, and I knew then that she had lost control completely. She came at me again, the blade glinting in the dim light. I grabbed her wrist, trying to wrestle the knife from her grip, but she fought harder, her strength fueled by pure rage. "Jenna, stop!" I shouted, struggling to hold her back. Finally, I managed to knock the knife from her hand, sending it clattering to the floor. She collapsed in front of me, sobbing, her anger giving way to a broken, shattered woman. I stood there, panting, blood pounding in my ears as the reality of what had just happened sank in. Jenna had tried to hurt me, maybe worse. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me turn, and I saw Emma and Sophie standing there, wide-eyed and terrified. They had seen everything. The sight of my daughter standing there, Emma clutching Sophie's hand, both frozen in shock, broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. I could see the confusion in their eyes, the fear. They had just witnessed their mother fall apart in a way no child should ever see. Jenna, still on the floor, sobbed uncontrollably, her rage and madness giving way to raw despair. I didn't know what to say, how to explain this nightmare to my girls. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't leave them here with her. Not ever again. I walked over to the girls, kneeling down in front of them, forcing my voice to sound steady despite the storm inside me. "It's okay, sweethearts. Everything's going to be okay." Emma stared up at me, her lip trembling. Why was Mommy so mad? I hesitated, searching for the right words, but none came. "Mommy's not feeling well right now, but we're going to take care of everything. You don't need to be scared." Sophie clung to me, her small arms wrapped around my neck, and I held them both tightly, trying to shield them from the wreckage of our family. Jenna's sobs grew louder, but I ignored her. Right now, my focus was on getting the girls out of this house. I couldn't let them see more of this. They needed stability, peace, everything Jenna couldn't provide. I stood up, my heart racing. "Go pack a few things, girls. We're going to stay somewhere else tonight." They looked up at me, wide-eyed, but they didn't argue. Slowly, they headed upstairs to gather their belongings. I stayed behind for a moment, my eyes on Jenna, who was still curled up on the floor. Her sobs had quieted, and now she just looked small, broken, like a stranger. "Jenna," I said, my voice low but firm, "I'm taking the girls. You need help. This can't go on." She didn't look at me, just wiped her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand. "You think you can just walk out and take them? You can't take them away from me. They're mine." "They're not yours, Jenna," I said, anger rising in my chest. "They're our children. But you're dangerous. I'm not going to let them grow up in this mess." Her eyes flicked toward me, and for a moment, the madness was back. "You think the courts are going to let you take them? You're nothing. They'll never believe you. They'll see you for what you really are, a failure." I ignored her, refusing to let her words cut any deeper. This wasn't about winning an argument anymore. It was about saving my daughters from the chaos she had created. By the time Emma and Sophie came back downstairs with their bags, Jenna had fallen silent again, staring at the floor, her face pale and hollow. I led the girls outside, breathing a sigh of relief once we were out of the house and away from Jenna's toxic energy. I loaded the girls into the car and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, my hands gripping the wheel as I tried to figure out what to do next. We couldn't go back to that house. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. There was only one place I could think of. I drove to my friend Mark's house. He'd already helped me through so much, and I knew he'd understand. When I knocked on his door, he answered almost immediately, his face full of concern the moment he saw me and the girls. "Ethan, what happened?" he asked, glancing at the girls. "We need a place to stay for the night," I said, keeping my voice low. "It's Jenna. Things got worse, a lot worse." Mark nodded, stepping aside to let us in. "Of course. You don't have to explain. The girls can stay in the guest room. Let's get them settled." After the girls were tucked into bed, I sat down with Mark in the living room, feeling the exhaustion weighing on me. He handed me a drink, and for a while, we sat in silence. I didn't know where to start. "I tried to leave with the girls," I finally said, my voice hoarse. "She lost it, attacked me. The girls saw everything." Mark's expression darkened. "You need to file for custody, Ethan. This can't go on. She's unstable. It's not safe for the girls to be around her." "I know," I muttered, rubbing a hand over my face. I'm going to fight for them, but it's not going to be easy. She'll do anything to keep them." "You've got the truth on your side," Mark said firmly. "And if she's getting violent, you've got a real case. But you need to document everything, every incident." I nodded, knowing he was right. But the thought of battling Jenna in court made me feel sick. She was manipulative, vicious, and knew exactly how to play the victim. She'd paint me as the villain, the distant father, the workaholic. She'd twist the story like she always had. But I had no choice. I had to protect my daughters. "Thanks for letting us stay here," I said quietly. I don't know where else to go right now." Mark gave me a supportive nod. "You're doing the right thing, man. The girls need you more than ever. You'll get through this." I wanted to believe him, but the road ahead felt long and dark. Jenna wasn't going to let go easily, and I knew the custody battle would be brutal. The custody battle began quickly, far sooner than I expected. Once Jenna realized I wasn't coming back to the house and had filed for full custody, her rage only intensified. I could see it in her eyes during every court hearing, the venom, the hatred. It wasn't about the girls anymore. It was about punishing me for daring to leave, for daring to protect our daughters from her. Each hearing was like reliving every moment of our failed marriage. Jenna spun lies and half-truths, portraying herself as a victim and me as the neglectful father. She claimed I was never around, too busy with work, leaving her alone to handle the girls. The courts listened, and I could feel the tide turning against me. But I wasn't alone in this fight. The young neighbor, the one who had been part of Jenna's betrayal, followed through on his promise. He testified on my behalf, detailing Jenna's manipulation and deceit, apologizing for his role in what had happened. I could see the regret in his eyes when he spoke, and though I had every reason to hate him, I couldn't. He had been a pawn in Jenna's game, just like me. Still, Jenna fought tooth and nail to keep control. Her ability to lie so convincingly, to manipulate every situation to make herself look like the victim, made every step of the battle harder than it should have been. Despite the neighbor's testimony, despite everything she had done, the court seemed to waver. The worst part was seeing Emma and Sophie caught in the middle. Jenna poisoned their minds, planting seeds of doubt, making them believe that I was abandoning them. I could see it in their faces every time I visited them during the limited hours I had. Hesitation, confusion. The spark of trust between us was slowly being extinguished by Jenna's toxic influence. It broke me. At the final custody hearing, I sat there, my hands clenched into fists under the table as the judge read through the findings. I had done everything I could, hired a lawyer, gathered evidence of Jenna's outbursts, documented her unstable behavior. But Jenna had played the role of the doting mother so well, convincing everyone that she was the only one who could truly care for our daughters. The verdict came down like a hammer blow. Jenna was awarded primary custody. The judge cited the importance of keeping the girls with their mother, stating that my demanding work schedule made full custody for me unrealistic. I would only be granted limited visitation rights, weekends, and holidays. It felt like a slap in the face, a punishment for trying to be a responsible parent, for working hard to provide for my family. Jenna's face was unreadable when the decision was announced, but I saw the slight curl of her lips, the satisfaction of winning. She had gotten what she wanted: control, power. I sat there, stunned, the words of the judge echoing in my head. It was over. I had lost. The days that followed felt like a blur. I saw the girls during my limited visitation hours, but the distance between us had grown. Jenna had done her damage, turning them against me in small, subtle ways. They still loved me, but the bond we once had been fractured, and I knew Jenna was reveling in every moment of it. On one of my visitation weekends, I picked the girls up from Jenna's house, my stomach tight with dread. Every time I stepped foot on her property, I felt like I was walking into enemy territory. I had to keep my guard up, knowing that Jenna was waiting for any excuse to make me look like the bad guy. As I walked up the driveway, Jenna stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "Don't be late bringing them back," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I didn't respond. I just took Emma and Sophie by the hand and led them to the car. The girls were quieter now, less excited about spending time with me than they used to be. I tried not to let it hurt, but it was impossible not to notice. The weekend passed too quickly, and before I knew it, I was driving them back to Jenna's. I tried to savor every moment, knowing that these visits were all I had left. But as we pulled into the driveway, that familiar sense of dread washed over me again. As I helped the girls out of the car, I noticed Jenna standing at the door, watching us. Something was different this time. There was a coldness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Come inside," she said, her tone low and ominous. I hesitated. "Why? I'm just dropping them off." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We need to talk." I told the girls to head inside, and they ran past Jenna without a second glance. Once they were out of earshot, Jenna stepped closer, her smile fading. "You think you've won something, don't you? Just because you get a few weekends with them." I narrowed my eyes, the anger simmering beneath the surface. "This isn't about winning, Jenna. It's about what's best for them." Her eyes flashed with fury. "Best for them? You think dragging me through court was best for them? You've humiliated me, Ethan. You've ruined everything." "I did what I had to do to protect them from you," I said, my voice low. Jenna's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this. You think you've escaped me, but you haven't. I'll make your life hell, Ethan. You won't get away from me that easily." I backed away, refusing to let her provoke me. "It's over, Jenna. You've already taken enough. You won't take any more." Her laughter followed me as I turned and walked back to the car, the weight of her threats hanging over me like a dark cloud. I knew she meant every word,